Hey horror fans, welcome back to room 237. Trying to be quiet, my girlfriend's sleeping on the couch. Welcome back to another review of a Frankenstein film. And this time I am doing House of Frankenstein. You can get it without the glare. Fuck it, House of Frankenstein. It's a film from 1944, and this was the first real ensemble crossover film. Although the previous film had Frankenstein and Wolfman, it kind of proved successful. I think more so box office than critical reviews. They were just like, more monsters, no problem. Originally they were going to have, so they wanted to do this monster mash ensemble piece, and this was the first real major one to just take all these different monsters, put them in the same film. Originally, it was going to be like the Mad Ghoul, the Ape Woman, Invisible Man. It was going to be called like Chamber of Horrors. But eventually they settled on Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, Wolfman, and the Hunchback. Which is weird that they chose the Hunchback, but I see why they went with it. And I would have to say this is probably the best monster film so far since Son of Frankenstein. I mean, I've heard House of Dracula isn't very good, but the way they added all these monsters and who plays them, but also, and also considered the Mad Doctor a monster, how they were able to tell each one's story very properly. There are some continuity errors, which I'll get to. It was directed by Erle C. Kenton, who I know he directed another. He also directed Ghost of Frankenstein. Okay. Now, as far as the cast, we have returning Boris Karloff, my favorite horror actor. But unfortunately, this was his last appearance in a Universal horror, or like the initial horror cycle, and he's not the monster. He's moved on to the Mad Doctor. Replacing him, and Lugosi's not in this film. You got Glenn Strange, who was originally a Western actor, to play the monster. And I would say he did do a better job than both Chaney and Lugosi. Got Chaney Jr. returning as Larry Talbot the Wolfman. John Carradine, this time, father of David Carradine, Bill, Kill Bill. Keith Carradine, Lundy from Dexter, the father of them. And J. Carrol Naish as Daniel the Hunchback. And the story is basically Karloff plays this Mad Doctor, Neiman, who's been in prison for 15 years. He's this Frankenstein-obsessed doctor. And his cellmate is a hunchback named Daniel. And he tells him, if we ever get out, you help me, I'll help you. Because Daniel wants his brain put in a normal body, not a hunchback. There's some freak occurrence, like lightning strikes the building, they're able to escape. They come across this traveling circus carriage of Chamber of Horrors, a guy named Lampini. Daniel, doing Karloff's bidding, kills him. They assume the role. And the carriage is carrying the skeleton of Dracula, which he says he got in the Carpathian Mountains, but Dracula was killed in London. Unless they're going by the book. In the book, he was killed in Transylvania. But in the book, he was killed with knives, not a stake, like in the movie. Oh well. Apparently, they weren't going with the Bram Stoker novel. My girlfriend got me this for Christmas, and I read it when I was a kid, but I don't remember too much of it. But when he pulls the stake out, he comes back to life and tells him, I'll protect your coffin if you do what I want you to do. So he goes around and he turns into a bat. He kills the cops that put him away. Kind of like how Igor had the monster kill in Son of Frankenstein. But the Dracula portion of the film is almost like a short film, like a subplot, because after like 25 minutes, we get to see Dracula do his thing, turns into a bat, sucks blood, kills, tries to seduce this one woman, gets in a chase with the cops on carriages as well. So it's like cops on horses, Dracula's carriage with the woman in it. Karloff and Daniel, they push his coffin out so they can keep going. Dracula tries to get to his coffin, sunlight, turns into a skeleton. He's dead. Out for the rest of the movie. But then they get to the town of Frankenstein, which I thought was weird, because they keep talking about, we don't want a chamber of horrors. This whole town's been full of horror. We've been trying to forget what the ruins of that castle, represents. Yet they named their town Frankenstein. And the reason why Nemo wants to get there is because he thinks Frankenstein has records. So he can, he's almost figured out how to do brain swapping and bringing back to life, but he just wants Frankenstein's final kind of input. Well, when they get to Frankenstein, there's this one gypsy named Alana or Alanka, and she's dancing. Daniel falls in love with her, and so he is not just a hunchback. They're pretty much doing the Quasimodo story, but I think they do it very well, because there's even parts during like the chase scene where he's like swinging around on the carriage to get to other places of it, kind of like a monkey, the way Lon Chaney Sr.'s Quasimodo did. But the gypsy's boss takes her money and beats her, and Daniel rescues her. And you get a touching yet really sad scene where they meet. He gives her some tea, and he talk about, how you're very pretty, I like you, will you be my friend? She says yes. Why don't you come up and sit with me? And when she sees the hump on his back, with the music, her reaction, which is literally just, and his heartbroken reaction, it really is a heartbreaking scene. Very well acted, well orchestrated. But then, of course, when they get to the castle, that's when it essentially, like Frankenstein meets Wolfman, it becomes another Wolfman sequel. It feels more like a Wolfman movie, because Larry Talbot and the monster are still frozen from the dam flood. They thaw him out. The monster is still dormant. Larry Talbot does wake up, and he's pissed off because he wants to be dead. But Karloff tells him, hey, if you show me where the records are, I can cure you. I can have your brain put in something else, and I'll help you. And Karloff's really the villain. He's kind of a Dr. Pretorius kind of villain from Bride of Frankenstein. He's Karloff, so he's got that look. He's just got that, evil charm. And about John Carradine, he plays Dracula as well as a good actor can, but he doesn't have the charisma, the charm, the magnetic gaze that Lugosi had. If Lugosi was in this as Dracula, he would have had a killer fucking film. But Karloff goes to see his former assistants who, betrayed him and got him put away for digging up bodies. And, he tells them pretty much, I'm going to have your brain put in a hunchback and your brain put in the... No, I'm going to have your brain put in the... like Hunchback and then the Wolfman. And when you look at the musical brains he wants to play, it doesn't really make sense. Because no matter whose brain, no matter whose body Talbot gets, he's still going to be the Wolfman. But anyway, the gypsy starts falling in love with Larry, which pisses off Daniel. So of course it's more like a Hunchback Esmeralda story, because she's more in love with, she's in love with the more handsome guy. And Chaney Jr. still does a great performance as the tormented Larry Talbot. Always does a good job. And the whole climax of the film, it's a constant build-up. Because, he's already killed people as the Wolfman after he was freed. So the townspeople, it's like they had their torches and pitchforks waiting. Actually, when Daniel tells Karloff, like, hey, I kind of want to be, he's big and strong, I kind of want to be him, especially for her. But instead of focusing on Daniel or Talbot, Karloff is just worried about getting the monster completely resurrected. Daniel tells the gypsy, she doesn't believe him. Even though when she figures it out, she still loves Talbot, so she kind of yelled at Daniel for no reason. And when she yells at Daniel, he just gets pissed and just starts whipping the monster. Which, this can kind of go two ways, because the monster is somewhat awake. So he sees Daniel whipping him, and then the end of the film, when you look at what happens to Daniel, you can say, oh, he's already pissed off at him. I like to think it makes it a little bit more interesting that when the monster sees him, he's reminded of Fritz, played by Dwight Frye in the original film, the Hunchback that tormented him with fire. That's what I like to think. But of course, and they go back to the original idea of electricity, which if you watch my reviews, they've been going back and forth with electricity and what it does. They use artificial electricity, brings the monster back, but just as that point, can't really explain why each monster has a justified story without spoiling it. So definitely check out House of Frankenstein. You don't really have to see much of the previous films. I think that's the idea. It's just, if you want to see a movie where they're all thrown together, check it out. So yeah, check out House of Frankenstein. It actually is really fun and really well acted and well made. Even the presence of Karloff makes it much better than the previous two. The gypsy decides to shoot Larry when he turns, but he attacks her first. She shoots him with a silver bullet. They die, in each other's arms, essentially. And I like how Larry kind of has a little peaceful smile on his face. I thought that was a nice touch. And that's kind of when Daniel says, fuck this, he's dead, the woman I love is dead, you weren't going to help me, I killed all these men for you, fuck you. And he goes to kill Karloff. And this is finally when we get to see the monster do something. But you see the silhouette on the wall of Daniel strangling Karloff as the monster is trying to break free from his straps. I thought that was a nice shot. And of course, he picks up Daniel, throws him out the window. And when he goes out the window and he falls, that scream is the recycled scream from Son of Frankenstein. It's when the monster finds Igor and screams. So it's actually Karloff's scream. And it's right as the villagers are coming up to the castle. But here the monster tries to wake Karloff up. And you get this great, wonderful moment when he picks Karloff up and he's still conscious. And they just kind of look at each other and share this moment. Because Karloff, the greatest horror actor and the original actor to bring the monster to life. It's almost, Karloff even said the monster is the best friend I've ever had. They just kind of share this moment, and it actually is kind of beautiful. Villagers come in, and they chase, the monster's carrying him. They chase him around. Glenn Strange did all of his stunts, even when they set the marsh on fire. Karloff trying to tell him that there's quicksand, don't go there, but he does, and they both sink. And then right there, I mean, it's been building up nonstop, and then just literally as soon as they both go under, the end. It's just like... Glenn Strange, he's much better than Lugosi as far as the monster. He is better than Chaney. He is the best since Karloff. He does kind of look strange. I mean, good name. He kind of has like a gaunt Herman Munster kind of look. And he does kind of do this a little bit. Not as bad as before. And I guess Karloff actually trained or helped Strange get in character, which kind of helps that look they give each other, make it even more special. But Strange would go on to play the monster in 2 more movies, so Karloff and Strange are both tied for 3 consecutive films. But it was Strange's approach of, mute, clumsy, kind of goofy, that sort of became the signature that would carry on for later films. Which really sucks because I really liked the increased intelligence of the first 2 films. But I would say, even though the Dracula portion feels out of place because it has nothing to do with the rest of the story, really. And once his portion is done within the first half hour, we never see any of those characters again. But, he's killed by sunlight. We see him turn into a bat, kill, try to seduce. So he's done well. The werewolf is trying to, find a way to fix himself. He's killed with a silver bullet. The mad doctor does bring the monster back to life. Even the Hunchback, he falls in love with the gypsy. He's very agile, unlike the carriages. Falls in love with the gypsy, who's in love with the more handsome guy. And so, even though it doesn't really follow continuity, which I think is another reason why you could probably just pop this one in at any time, it does do a very good job at just taking what makes those characters and giving them their due. Granted, they all don't share the same amount of screen time. Like I said, Dracula gets his done and over with, and then he's gone. But, and it is very well acted. If Lugosi was Dracula, this would have been a masterpiece film, I think. And, it tells the stories very respectfully. It does have a good pace to it. I would say the ending is a bit abrupt, but I'll take it. Wonderfully acted. I love the moment at the end when Karloff and the monster just look at each other. Heartbreaking scene with the Hunchback when the gypsy finds out he's a hunchback. Performances across the board for everyone. For a movie where that should have probably failed because Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman didn't do very well, I think they pulled it off very well. It's a very fun movie, and it really, even if it's just a novelty film of, hey, we got all these characters together, have fun with it, it still feels like a well-made, well-written, well-executed film. It doesn't just feel like a novelty. Unlike the next one, House of Dracula, which I heard is kind of a hot mess. But anyway, that is 1944's House of Dracula. And unlike the first two Frankenstein films, I can highly recommend this one. It is a lot of fun. Be a great Halloween season type movie. House of Frankenstein. But thank you for watching.